Chapter 18. The Big Race. The three men in the dog sled race with Pete had so much more experience driving huskies that they quickly got ahead of the boy. "Oh, Pete is trailing," Holly wailed. "Don't worry," Mrs. Hollister calmed her. "It's a long race course, and Pete still has a chance." Pete, meanwhile, cracked his whip in the air and urged his team along. "Mush! Mush!" he shouted, and could feel a stronger pull from the dogs. As he rounded the first bend in the course, he remembered his experience on the lake and used his brake to advantage. Soon he began to gain on the teams ahead of him. As he drew abreast of the last one, Pete shouted once more, "Mush, Fluff! Mush!" The great dog's muscles strained as she pulled harder and harder, urging the other huskies along with her. Pete's Komatik edged past the man in front of him. Now he was third. By this time the onlookers were shouting wildly, and the Hollisters were screaming Fluff's name. The dog seemed to know exactly when to take a spurt and galloped past the second-place team. Pete gave it plenty of room, as Trevor Nelson had instructed him. "If I can only catch that first team," Pete thought. But the dogs in the lead were very fast. Pete gained on them for a while, then dropped back. "Fluff!" Pete shouted, and cracked the whip again. The faithful animal surged forward with a tremendous burst of speed. For a few yards, Fluff raced neck and neck with the opposing king dog. Then she pulled steadily into the lead. Pete passed his last opponent. "Oh, nothing must stop me now," the boy thought excitedly. "I must drive well." Not far from the finish line, Pete saw something which made his spine tingle with fear. Stockman and Gates, standing at the top of a little hill, rolling a log toward the path of the speeding dog team. If it hit them, everything would be lost. Using his brake, he screamed, "Fluff! Danger! Gee!" Fluff seemed to understand. She swerved to the right, avoiding the rolling log by inches. The lurch nearly threw Pete off balance, but he clung to the Komatik as Fluff turned back on the course and made a beeline for the finish tape. "Pete's going to win!" Ricky cried excitedly. Pam had been standing with Holly and Ricky some distance from her parents and the Nelsons and seen the rolling log. As Pete's sled flashed across the finish line, she and the others ran to find Mr. Stamp. They quickly told him what had happened. "I saw the men run toward that lake," Pam said, pointing. "We'll chase them," the postman said angrily. The three climbed into his snowmobile and it roared off. "There they are, right in the middle of the ice," Ricky shouted. When the two men heard the snowmobile, they glanced over their shoulders. Both wore beards. "Why, they're the Greeble brothers," Mr. Stamp said, puzzled. "I'm sure they're just disguised," Pam insisted. Mr. Stamp chased them in circles until the men fell to the snow exhausted. Then he stopped the snowmobile. Ricky was the first to jump off. He ran to the two men and tugged at their beards. Off they came. "We've caught you!" Ricky shouted. The postman quickly reached into his snowmobile and pulled out 2 leather straps which he used to bundle his mail. As the children watched, Mr. Stamp tied their wrists behind their backs. "Now get up," he ordered, "and climb into the car." As they drove back, Pam asked their prisoners one question after another. Yes, the men said, they had wanted Fluff because she was probably the world's best Eskimo dog. They had not been able to find her and thought Trevor Nelson might return to Froston and race again this year. That was why they'd come there. "We didn't know Snowflake Camp belonged to your grandparents," Mr. Gates growled, "or that you Hollister kids would upset all our plans." As the snowmobile reached the shore, a policeman hurried to meet them. "Oh, Mr. Mountie," Holly shouted, "we have 2 bad men for you." As the Mountie snapped handcuffs on the pair, he praised their captors. Then he said, You men are the ones who hurt Fluff in the race last year." Ricky gazed straight at them. "But you didn't get away with it this year, and Pete won." At this very moment, Pete was about to receive a silver cup. His brother and sisters hurried back, reaching him just as the boy accepted it. The captain of the Mounties turned to Trevor Nelson. "We'll buy all of Fluff's puppies if you want to sell them," he said. "I'd like to," replied Mr. Nelson. Then he gripped Pete's hand. "I can never thank you enough," he said. "You've made this the happiest day of my life." "And for me, too," added Miss Nelson. Suddenly Gramp exclaimed, "Goodness, here comes more excitement." They turned to see a truck being driven toward them. On the back of it was a big motion picture camera. "Look up here, Pete and the rest of your family," the operator said, and the camera whirred away. "Why are you taking pictures of us happy Hollisters and Fluff?" Sue asked. "These movies are for television," the man replied. "We took pictures of the race, and now for the close-ups." The children laughed and waved at the camera. "That's fine," the cameraman shouted. "Now people all over the United States and Canada will have a chance to see the happy Hollisters on their television set."